Okay, hey everybody, welcome to Indigenous Magnet Beading. My name's Mitch, and I'm going to be the one kind of guiding you through this process that we're doing here together. So, first things first is I'll show you what it is that we're working on. This is going to be the piece that we're going to do. There's our magnet rose. You can see on the back, there's our magnet, right? So this is our end goal. This is what we're all going to be doing together. So our first purpose of this little intro video here is to show you what it is that you're going to be getting in your beading kit and just kind of to know what it is you're working with. So I'll start by showing you this is what your kit's going to look like. Everyone's going to get something that looks just like this. And inside there's going to be a variety of little tools and supplies that you're going to need to make this happen. So let's kind of go through these, right? So the first thing is you're going to be getting a little baggie with 2 needles in it. So these are size 10 beading needles, extra long, or like English beading needles if you ever decide to buy some of these yourself. They are quite flexible and they're long. And the idea with these is when you're beading, we're giving you 2 of them, right? One to use, one to lose. You might break 1 or 2 of them, right? So the trick is try your very best to pull straight on your needle. If you pull crooked, which a lot of people tend to do without even knowing it, you'll bend them and also potentially break them, right? So pull super straight on this and you shouldn't break any if you're being mindful of that. Second, we've got our fabric stabilizer. This is something that is what you're going to be beading onto. This is like your beading medium. So it's just like a stiffened piece of fabric that you can get at like Fabricland or any fabric store like that. So this is what you're going to be putting your template onto. The backing of your project is going to be a piece of leather. So this is deer hide, super, super soft deer hide. It's going to be glued to the back and trimmed, and you're going to edge onto that. So this is your backing for your project. You're going to be getting a thing of dental floss, which is funny. Obviously, flossing is important, but it has nothing to do with that. Your floss is going to be your thread. So a lot of people go out there and buy beading thread, and then they wax it themselves because wax thread's a little bit nicer to work with. It holds your piece together, like your beaded work is going to be a lot more solid, and the beads won't rattle around because the wax sort of holds it together. So we kind of know the little hack of just using dental floss. It's super strong and already pre-waxed. So you'll be getting one of these. The backing of your piece or your magnet is going to come like this. It's just a little strip magnet. You can peel and stick on the back. However, we're also going to glue onto that sticky part and then adhere that onto your piece so that it's very, very on there. We don't want it popping off when you're removing and putting your magnet onto the fridge or wherever it is that it's going to be. And then finally, of course, there's going to be beads. All right, so you're going to get 3 colors. This is going to be your outline. Your dark purple is going to be the outline of your project. You're going to have the fill color, which is this light color, this light kind of lavender. That's going to fill your petals. And then you've got a pearly white that is going to be for your edging. All right, so that's all what's going on. Then the last thing, which I don't even have one here, there it is. You'll be getting one of these cut out into your piece, and that's the template. So this will be the little guide that you follow as you bead. You can see your outlines there, and then you'll fill it all in and edge it. So that is everything that's going to be coming in your kit. There are a few things, however, that we're not going to be sending everybody, just because they're tools that are A, a little bit more expensive, and B, just things that maybe you just want to get yourself if you're going to potentially become a beader. But you can, some of them are just things that are around the house. So scissors, obviously a lot of people probably have scissors. Having a relatively good pair is important for cutting through leather. Even though this leather is super soft, it's still nice to have a good pair of scissors. Something like this, these are beading needle nose pliers. The idea with these is that they are round. They are rounded tips, so they don't have that sharp, hard edge there with like the grips inside. That can potentially do damage to beads. It can do damage to needles and things like that. So these pairs are really slick. You can get them at like Michael's. You can order them online, like on Amazon. I think some even really good dollar stores might even have these, or even Walmart. So check around. But you can use needle nose pliers if you're in a pinch, and it will help you, especially when you're trying to pull through your finished project, when you've got, you know, your leather and your stabilizer, and you need to pull your needle through both layers. That's super helpful. And then, of course, the glue. So glue is something we didn't include in this because the big containers of glue, they're big, they're, you know, expensive enough to send everybody who participates. So we use something like Fabri-Tac, which you can get at like Fabricland or other kind of fabric style stores, or Michael's, things like that might have it. But you can use super glue, right? Like a good super glue to attach your magnet to the back of your piece. And when it comes to attaching your paper template onto your fabric stabilizer to start your piece off, you can even just use like a glue stick for that. So a glue stick for this purpose and super glue for your magnet would work. So those are things that we figured a lot of people have around their house probably. So that, I think, sums it up as far as all of our pieces go. So otherwise, we've got a tutorial video set that you're also in access to, and then just follow all the way through those, and it'll guide you through the whole process. And of course, we've got a Zoom also coming up, where we can add some extra information. We can do a bit more guidance. You can kind of show us where you've gotten to on your piece, or ask questions if you're stuck. So we can also see you there sort of live and in person. So otherwise, Chigamik, Kinwea, thanks everybody, and good luck on your pieces, okay? Thank you. Okay, so our first step for our beading project is to thread our needle. So this is something very important that we need to get done first. So as you can see, we're using dental floss here. It's got a couple of advantages. It's waxy, which means that it really holds your beads in place. It's also a little bit thicker, which again just like builds like some better sturdiness to your project. Some beading threads work well, but you can see that the beads tend to rattle around at the end unless you're really pulling tight. So as a beginner, this can be a really helpful thing to work with. Also, it's really easy to get and it's cheap. So what we need to do is thread this needle first. So dental floss is typically flat, right? It's not round. And the eyes of needles are also flat. So you want to make sure that when you're threading your needle, that you're orienting your dental floss vertically up and down, same with the eye of your needle. That way you can slide it through. So I got it there the first shot. It might take you a couple tries. Don't feel bad about that. For a lot of people, it can take a lot of tries. And if the end of your dental floss frays a little bit, I would suggest taking a pair of scissors, coming in and snipping it on a diagonal, kind of straighten it out, and then you end up with a brand new fresh end, and then try and thread that. Don't try and keep threading a frayed end because it'll never go through. Okay, so cut a new fresh end on a diagonal and then try and thread that one. So now we need to set up our thread. So what we need to do here when you're beading is you're going to have a long end and then you're going to have a shorter tail as well. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try and move my board so you can see here. We've got a short end and then a long end. All right, so our short end we want to be about maybe a half to a third the length of our total piece, right? You can see this short end here. So now all we need to do is we're going to tie a knot on just our long end, so our short end will remain open. This is our safety escape. If you make a mistake, you can actually back your needle right off your thread and then pull it all out and then fix a mistake and start back over. If we tied both ends, you wouldn't be able to do that. So it's not like setting up a sewing thread. So then what we're going to do for this is you want to get either a double or triple knot on the end of it. I suggest doing a surgeon's knot, where essentially what you do is you go through like you're going to make a knot, right, a regular knot, but then go through again and then loop through a third time. Essentially what this leaves you with, right, is a triple knot all in one shot. And now when you pull it through, you'll end up with a knot where all three are clustered together. You don't have to try and slide each knot together onto the next one. That's almost impossible to get perfect. So try a surgeon's knot. If you need to look it up, you can YouTube surgeon's knots, how to make one of those as well, and it's very easy to do. So otherwise, this is our needle setup. We've got our needle, we've got a short end that is open, and then we have a long end that has a knot at the end. This is our beading setup. Okay, so our next step is going to be fastening your template onto the fabric stabilizer. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to trim around our template. This is something that doesn't need to be exactly perfect. You don't need to cut it out so perfectly on the lines, but you want to get relatively close because you don't want too much paper hanging out past your line. So get pretty close. Doesn't have to be perfect, just pretty darn close. So that should just take a moment, like I just did here. Okay, there we go. So there's my piece cut out. You can see it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And then we're going to be fastening it onto our fabric stabilizer. So what we need to do with that is use a glue. So what we use here is a fabric tack, right, which is like a fabric glue. You can get this at any kind of fabric store, fabric land, or even like a Walmart or something like that, or Michael's might have something like this. But at home, you can also use a glue stick, which works just fine. What I would suggest is not using hot glue. It's very, very thick and it dries quite hard. And the problem with that is that you still need to be able to get your needle through this piece, right? So if you have too much glue and it's piled up and it's really thick, you won't be able to put your needle through easily, right? So bear in mind, be sparing with the amount of glue that you use, okay? So for myself, using my fabric tack, just need to let it drip down because this stuff is quite thick. And the idea is that I'm just going to smear it around onto my template relatively thinly, and you want to try and get it near the edges as well so that your edges don't peel up too much. But it's worth mentioning that the glue here that you put on is not the thing that's going to be holding your piece together, right? You're going to be beading through this whole piece, and it's going to be your stitching and your beading that holds your piece together. So essentially, the glue you're using right now is just going to be to hold this template on while you start beading. So I don't know if you can see that. It's a little bit tough with all the light here, but there's just a little bit of glue on there. And then when I push it onto my template, I kind of flatten it out nicely so that I don't get any big globs of glue. I want it to be spread evenly throughout the whole piece. So there you go. So once that's on nice and smooth onto your piece like so, what I want to do next is I want to trim around my stabilizer to get rid of these sharp corners. So I'm going to move like so. And there we have it. Something like this is what you're going to want to have. The trick is there's enough room for me to hold on to my piece on the outside of my template. This is super important because when you're beading, you need something to hold on to, because once this whole thing's beaded, you don't want to be holding onto your beads. You want to be holding onto the stabilizer. Okay? Okay, so now we're actually ready to begin beading. So we're going to be doing our outline first. So this whole black outline you see of all of our petals, this is what we're going to be beading first. We're going to be using our dark beads, our darker purple, to be doing this outline, and then we'll be filling in afterwards with our lighter purple. So you can use something as a beading board. I've got a piece of felt that's pulled over a piece of wood and then glued into place. So that's my beading board here. But you can use a piece of leather, a piece of cloth, even like a shallow dish or like a little Tupperware, anything that you can easily get into and scoop beads out of comfortably. So we're going to be starting by choosing a point on our outline to begin with. So we go from underneath the piece, and we're going to pop out on a line. I like to kind of go on a junction, so I've chosen kind of a junction spot here where you can see I've kind of popped up through, right here. So now I'm going to pull my needle all the way through. And then what I'm going to do next is pick up 3 beads. So I'm going to use a little scooping motion like this. 1, 2, 3. So there we go. I've grabbed my 3 beads are on like that. So now I'm going to slide them all the way down onto my template. And now what you're going to have, something I'm going to explain right now, is that it's really nice to hold your piece in one hand, and you can see I've got the thread. I've got the thread in between my thumb and the piece, and that leaves my other hand free to use the needle with. So what we're going to do now is you can use your one hand here, and you can steer your beads. If you look at this, I'm going back and forth. I can actually steer them, right? So obviously you want it so that it's lined up on a line. You can use your thumb to kind of push them back into place. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to come down with our needle, pop through here at the end of our last bead. So you can see 1, 2, 3, we're coming down at the last one. You pull all the way through, like so. And now you should have 3 beads that are held in place, like so. Now this is the tricky part. You're going to need to come back up through beads 1 and 2. So we'll show you what that looks like now. As you can see here, I've come back up through beads 1 and 2. Right? If you picture bead 1, 2, and 3, I'm up through those 2 on the line, pull all the way through. And then now my final step here is to actually go through beads 2 and 3. So I'm going to slide this through so you can see we're actually going through those beads. When you're done this process, you can also kind of thumb roll and tug on your string so that they become tight. And then what you should be left with is your string is actually exiting the center of your last bead. So that's the full process of doing your bead. I'm going to do that one more time a little bit quicker. I'm now set to pick up 3 beads. So I've grabbed my 3. They're on my needle. I slide them all the way down so that they now butt up against the 3 beads I had on before. All right? And then again, I steer them into the right spot, and I'm going to tack it down at the end of that last bead. This now, pull all the way through. There we have it. Now I've got all these beads in a row. You can see them like that. So now what I want to do is come up between my first and second bead that I've just put down. So I'm going to do so. This is something that you got to do a few times to get the hang of. You got to kind of feel it out, and there it is. I've now come up in between my first and second bead that I've tacked down. You pull all the way through, and then now I'm going to push forward right through the beads. If you look closely here, I'm going through those two beads and then all the way through. Pull all of your slack. Then you can also give it a little tug, a little thumb roll, get them in place. And now you can see that I've got 6 beads in place right on the line. Then you can just turn corners and you follow your pattern all the way around. You can also pick up more than 3 beads if you're on a straightaway. You could pick up maybe 5, and if you're really on a big long straight, you can even do 7. But the idea is you're always going to pop up from underneath with your needle between your first and second bead, and then run through the remainder. So if you've put 5 beads down, you come up through bead 1 and 2, and then you're going to slide through your beads 2 all the way to 5, right? So you're always moving through all the remainder of your beads. Okay. Okay, so now that I've started in my corner here and came around, I've now reached the end of this petal. So I've finished, I'm sticking out the top like I would be, I'm ready for my next beads. But what I need to do now is I don't want to turn this corner down here, because then my beads will be facing that direction, and that's the way that it'll turn. And then when I start back up here at the top of this next petal, it won't look cohesive, it won't look like it flows. So you want to really pick out each petal and do each one in its own direction. So now what I need to do is I need to start back at this bottom corner here and then come up around for this next petal. So there's a way to do this that's quite easy. I go in from the top, you poke through out to the bottom, right? Pull all the way through, like so. So now what I've got is my string is underneath. I'm from the back, and then I'm going to pop back up right on the corner of where I want to start. So you can see now here, I've popped my needle back out at the beginning of my new petal that I want to start. I can pull all the way through, like so, get rid of all your slack. And now I'm ready to pick up another 3 beads, let's say. So I can grab those 3, slide them all the way down. And then you can see now I'm on this new line, right? Here's my new beads. So now I'm going to start working around this new petal. So I'll tack it down at the end of this 3rd bead, pull all the way through, the same motion we've been doing, like so. I come up in between beads 1 and 2, like so. So now you can see I've come up between my first and second bead, pull that all the way through. And then my last little motion I need to do is come through, right, through my last 2 beads with my thread like so. And now I'm ready to add, try and get this nice and close for you. I'm now ready to add a new set of beads. And what this is now going to allow me to do is trace around this new petal, all in the same way. So you see how this direction of this petal is now flowing, and it'll look like this next petal stops into it, which is very important. And you can do the same thing all the way around. So when I finish, I come all the way to this point here on this petal. Actually, this one comes all the way down, and then I'm going to pop back up at the beginning of this next petal and follow it around, and then pop back up here and follow this petal around, and doing that same motion, popping up here and finishing this petal. Then I can jump into my next line on the interior petals and start working around those. You're always thinking about the direction and the flow of each one of your lines and how those beads are going to lay down. Okay? Okay, so now that we've done the majority of our outline, we've done all these big outside petals, now we're starting to get into this smaller stuff here where it's a little bit more tight. So what's important here, as you can see, is these two long petals in particular. We really need to be careful to save some space. A really classic thing that new beaders do is forget how much room beads actually take up. They take up quite a bit of space. So we want to leave enough blank space on this petal and in this petal to be able to put our lighter color. So the important thing to do here is to make sure, especially on these two tight little petals, to make sure we give some space. Try and have your beads sit on the far edge of our black lines here. That way it'll leave enough blank space in the middle to put our lighter filling color. And you need to be mindful of how you flow your beads around these pieces. Look at where does each line start and where does each one stop, and be mindful of stopping your beads in places that allow the flow through of another petal line. So just look at that, and obviously you can use our completed piece at the end as a reference guide, and you can kind of follow those lines and see where do they start and stop and kind of replicate it. But it's just a good thing to be mindful of as you're beading. Okay, so now that we've completed all of our outlining, we'll have a good look at that so you can just see exactly what that looks like. So now we're going to begin filling with our lighter color. So you can see here I've got my light kind of lilac color, and that's what we're going to be filling the inside of our petals with. So there are different ways to fill. You can do straight lines, you can work in circles or spirals, there's all different ways to do it. But I'm going to suggest one way for us to all work on this together, because I think it's going to add a really nice flow to the piece. So what we're going to do, I'll show you here, we'll come in a little bit closer. So if we look at this petal right here, this is the one that we want to work on. I'm going to be starting here in the corner and then following the outside line and then stopping against this petal. So I'll essentially be kind of highlighting the inside of our petal outline that we already have here. Once we finish that one, we'll start back here at the beginning next to it and run a second line inside and stop here. And then a third and a fourth, and we may be able to get a little fifth line on the inside. So we're going to follow those. So stay tuned. I'm going to fill this one out, and then we'll be able to have a look at what that looks like next. Okay, so I've completed now my very first one of these fill lines. So you can see I've started down here, and I've come around following our outline, and then I've stopped where the petal line stops. And now my string obviously is sticking out the top. So just like we always do, I'm going to plunge my needle in here, pull it out through the bottom, like so, and then I'm going to pop back up where I started, right beside that bead line. So now when I pull through, I'm going to be able to start my next row right beside this one. So I'll take on another few beads. Say I grab 3. Right, I'll pull them all the way down and show you. Now our next run of beads is going to be in beside like this. And again, I'll turn the corner, follow all the way around to this side, and we'll just keep doing it like little rainbow shapes. And then eventually we'll just be doing a straight line across the bottom. Okay, so here we have it. I just finished up filling out this one petal. So you can see it sort of works in like a little kind of arcs, little rainbows where they go and they follow that outline. And then my inner 1 or 2 rows, I was able to turn the corner of the second last one just barely, and then my last row was just straight. So with each one of these petals, again, they're not all quite the same. They're different shapes, different curves. So you have to play that game where you curve as many as you can where it makes sense, and then where it starts to become too tight of a corner in there, then you can just run them straight across and you don't really have to turn them anymore. So each one you're going to have to treat a little bit individually, and that's part of kind of building that skill of beading is learning how to gauge how many do you squeeze in there. Should you leave space? Should you try and fit one more? And that's really where the skill kind of comes into play. So I'm going to continue along now and fill this whole thing out, and then I'll show you the next steps after that. Okay, so you can see here we've got our finished piece as far as the actual flat beading goes. So it's outlined and it's filled. So I'm just going to bring it up so you can get a bit of a closer look at it here. So this is it completed. Next we'll be cutting it out, gluing it to our leather backing, and then edging the whole thing together to seam it up. So stay tuned for those. Okay, so now that we've finished all of our beading on the face of our piece here, we need to trim off our excess fabric stabilizer. So the thing to bear in mind with here is on the back of our piece, you can see all of your thread is all over it, right? All of your dental floss. The trick is, as you trim around the outside, you don't want to accidentally cut your dental floss that's on your back here. Otherwise, your beads will come falling off and it becomes a bit of a thing to repair that. So what I suggest to everybody is cut pretty darn close, but don't try and cut too close because you might accidentally snip some beads. So I'm going to go around here and cut it. You want it as close as you can get without being in danger of cutting any stitches. So just work your way around, cutting this piece out. Sometimes you gotta go at it in different angles to be able to get into the little corners of our petals here. But just take your time and really try not to cut any stitches. Every once in a while, if you need to, you can always flip it upside down, check where your stitches are, and make sure you're not going to cut any, and then come back around. And then the thing is that you can always come back after and trim off any pieces you don't like. You can see there I got pretty close to the edge. Almost done now. There. So when you're finished, it should look something like this. Okay. Okay, so our next step here is going to be fastening our leather backing onto the back side of our piece. So it's going to be leather onto the back of our piece like this. And obviously we're going to trim around this afterwards. So what we want to do is you've got two sides to your leather. There's a soft, felty, kind of furry side, right, if you look at that. And then there's a smooth, shiny side. We want that shiny side to be out. We want that to be facing out. And we want our furry side against our fabric stabilizer. So that's how we're going to orient this piece. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to use glue. Again, we're using our Fabri-Tac here, which you can buy at like, you know, any kind of fabric store. I think even places like Walmart have it. Otherwise, you can use like a glue stick, or if you have any kind of like middle ground glue. You don't want to use like something intense like a crazy glue for this because it might be a little bit too hard on the inside of your piece because you still need to bead through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply our glue to the back side of our beaded piece. So back onto the backing of this. I'm just letting my slow Fabri-Tac come through the tube. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to adhere this to the back. So you don't want to put a ton of it because we're going to bear in mind that we are going to be edging our two pieces together. It's going to seam them up almost like a zipper. So this glue isn't there to be the sole way of holding our piece together. It's just there to hold it while you bead it and just to kind of make a bit of a smoother seam. Okay, so I've gone around and I've just kind of smeared the glue around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my leather and take the fuzzy side and put it down onto my piece. You can do that either way you'd like. You can also put your piece onto the leather if you'd like. Whatever one works best for you, doesn't really matter. And then what you're going to do is obviously we're just going to hold some pressure on that piece and just allow it to sink in and glue together. Once you're confident that there's at least a relatively good amount of adhesion there, we can then come around with our scissors and obviously we're going to trim our leather off. So just take your time, make the cuts as nice as you can. Try and get it right up against your fabric stabilizer. All right, so I'm going to come around. Like so. Then once this is complete, we'll be ready to actually get into edging, to actually do our beading here. And it's going to form a little seam that's going to hide the junction between our leather and our stabilizer. And it'll really finish our piece off. So there, something like that. You can always come back and trim it to make it more perfect if you'd like, but you can see, you can't even see the leather from the front. And if I flip it over, it's the shiny side of leather out. Okay, so now we're actually ready to edge our piece. So I've got my edging color here, which is that pearly white, and that's what we're going to be using to seam this up. So the main thing too is with your thread, you're going to set up your needle the same way you have been this whole time, a short end that's open and a long end that's closed. But what I would suggest is you're going to want to take a really liberal, full like wingspan of thread here, right? So you want lots and lots of floss for this because you want to be able to bead this thing. You want to be able to do the whole edge in one piece of thread. You don't want to have to stop and then reattach halfway, right? Or almost at the end, even more frustratingly. So that's what we're going to do, okay? So I'll show you how to make this happen. So what you want to do is you're going to go around your piece and find a spot where your glue hasn't really held your edge together. So I can see here, I can peel back this leather quite easily here, right? See how that just peels back? So that's going to be where I start. So I'm going to take my needle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in on a diagonal from as close or as far away from the edge as I can get. So I'll put this through, then I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see here, I've come in diagonally from my piece. Now when I pull it through, the reason I do that is now my knot is hidden all the way under this piece. So now when I close my leather like so, you can't see the knot. So that's sort of the trick there, right? Your knot is now hidden. So now what we're going to do, that our piece is coming out right on the edge of our beads here, is we're going to pick up our first white bead. You can slide it all the way down, like so. So now we've got one white bead that's sitting on the edge here. Now what we need to do, getting the first one on is a little bit difficult, and then beyond that, it gets a little easier. So what we want to do is we're now going to loop back around and go through our leather and our stabilizer just behind the bead we put down. So I'm going to pop out. Now you can see, I'll try and get this so it's visible. It's hard because we have a white edge, but I've popped out just behind my piece. I can now pull all the way through. And now my bead is sort of sitting on the edge there. Let's see if you can see this any better. My bead's on the edge. Now what I need to do is take my bead and turn it in the direction that I want to be going. So I'm going to be beading this way. So I'm going to put my needle through the bead that way. I can pull my slack all the way through, like so. And now I have bead number 1 on the edge of my piece. You can see it there on the edge. Now what I need to do after that is pick up another bead. And then this is where the real edging technique starts to come into play now that I've got my first bead anchored down. So now I'm putting on bead number 2 right beside it. What I want to do now is come in from the top, just in front of my bead, just in front of it, and I want to come in a little bit diagonally so that I get a little bit of meat on that leather. So I'm going to try and show you this as best as I can. You can see I've come through diagonally here so that I actually get some leather with my needle. Now when I pull it all the way through, I'll really be able to seam those pieces up. So let's see how we manage. So now I'm behind the leather, right? I'm behind the piece. I'm on the back side. And then what I'm going to do again is go forward the same direction through my bead. That one I just put down. Pull all the way through, right? All the way. And then always give it a little tug, give it a little pull, just to get it solid. So now I'll show you what this looks like as close as I can. So now we have 2 beads down, one right beside the other one. And if we do this correctly, they're going to start pushing each other together, and we're going to end up with like a zipper kind of edge on this that's going to hide a lot of our seaming up of our leather in our piece. So I'm going to do that once more so you can see what this looks like. So we're coming out of our most recent bead. I pick up a single new bead. You can slide it all the way down and put it right up against the one you just placed. Now I'm going to come down just in front of that new bead, diagonally poking through my leather at the back. You pull your slack all the way through, like so. And then your bead is going to be kind of sitting a little bit crooked until you come in from behind it and go through. So I'm always heading in the same direction. My needle's always coming through this way. So every single bead I lay, I'm always coming in through the back of the bead and going through in the direction that I'm working. So always keep your directionality the same way. Now I can pull my bead or my thread through, and again, always important to really tug your piece nice and tight. And then now I've got my 3 beads in line now, right? So you can see that really well. And then essentially you just continue working 1 bead at a time all the way around the piece. And as you continue to put beads down, they'll start to really squeeze each other together, and eventually you'll end up with this seamless edge that looks kind of like a zipper. So I'm going to continue working on this, and we'll show you some progress as we go. Okay, so now you can see I've edged almost the entire thing. We're right at the very end here. We've just got this last little bit left to do. There's only a few beads left. You can see that if you put them really close together and beat them tightly, you'll end up with almost what looks like a zipper-like finish all the way around. Now if I flip my piece over, you can see what that looks like, how close that stitching is together. That's what you're going for. You want them to be barely a bead widths apart so that they kind of hug up to each other. The skill, it kind of lies in gauging how close can you put them without making them too close so that they sit nice and snug together. So for the end here, I'm just going to, again, like we've been doing, put another couple beads in, and I'll show you what it looks like. I'll show you what it looks like to wrap this up as far as tying off for edging goes. So again, I'm just going to fly along like we've been doing, putting in my last couple beads. This job becomes really easy when you use a little pair of needle nose pliers to pull through the leather like that, because sometimes it can be tough. So we're almost there. I'm on my last bead now. I can tell I can only fit 1 more in here. So I'm going to tack that last bead into place, putting it right where it needs to go. So again, get it on a bit of an angle through there, like you always have been. Pull that through. And our last bead is going to be put into place. And then what I'm going to do for this, okay, is that I'm going to actually put it through my very first bead I started with. So I'm actually going to go through 2 beads here. So you can see now I've actually gone through 2 beads, not just 1. My last bead and my first bead are both through. So I'm actually pulling through 2. What this is going to do is lock them into place. Sometimes you got to do a little tug because you're going back through that first bead again. So just give her a little pull. There we go. Okay. I'll pull all my thread through. Then I'll show you how to tie off next. So now to tie off, you can see I've gone through that last bead and the first bead together, so I've joined them. So now I have a seamless edge all the way around this where you cannot tell where it starts or finishes, except for this thread hanging out. Now what we're going to do here is we want to hide this thread as best we can, and we're going to actually try and get it to pop out in the center of our piece, because we're going to put a magnet over that anyway. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in on a very shallow angle here. If you can see, I'm coming in just on a very light angle, pushing my pushing my needle in. It might take a couple tries to kind of get it right. But what the goal is here is to emerge out in the center of my piece with my needle. This can take a little bit of a moment to kind of find that soft spot that it'll travel through. And then eventually you can kind of see your needle moving through your piece. And I know I'm starting to get there. If I kind of bend it, you can see that's where it is, out in the center here. Right? So I'll go a little further, and then I'm actually going to use my pliers to pull this through, and you'll see we're going to pop up kind of in the middle of the piece. There she is. Perfect. So once you get it through a little bit, you can come to the front, and then you'll grab, and always pull nice and straight. Don't pull crooked or else you'll break your needle. So now I'm going to pull straight like this, and then it's going to come through. All right, there it is. All my slack through. And now my string has come out in the center. I'm going to have a magnet over that, which is going to hide it. And then it's very simple now to tie off. All I do, just like typical, is I make a surgeon's knot. 1, 2, 3 loops around. And then I pull my knot right down to the center. I can pinch it with my finger, like so. So I've got it pinched there in my thumb, my triple knot. I pull all my slack, and there I'm left with a knot right at the leather. And then I'm able to clip off my excess, and there we have it. Completely edged all the way around, like so. And the only evidence of it is this tiny little tail in the center, which doesn't matter because my little magnet, I can just peel and stick right in the center, and that is going to be it. I'm going to use a little bit of glue to attach this as well, but otherwise it's incredibly simple at this point. You peel off your sticker, you're going to add some glue as well onto the back of your magnet, and then you can simply attach it like so, and you'll have your magnet completely finished. That's it.